The last example demonstrates the concepts of pass-by value and pass-by reference in C#. Now, C# is different from some of the other C-based programming languages in terms of how it implements pass-by reference. In all C-based languages, by default, when you pass something into a method or a function, the thing you're passing in is passed by value by default. Now in C and C++, you have the concepts of pointers to allow you to effect the concept of pass by reference. C++ also provides another concept called a reference for that purpose, but that's different from the C# concept of a reference. Java is more like C# in terms of how it uses this concept called references, but does not provide the flexibility that C# does for doing pass by reference. Now, in this example, we have a main method and 3 additional methods that will be called from main, one called square_ref, one called square_out, and one called square. Now, this last one is a pass by value method. If you declare a parameter with just a simple data type of any kind, whether it's a class or a simple type, doesn't make a difference, and a parameter name, the value that's passed to that parameter is copied and passed into the function. If it's a simple type like an integer, a copy of the integer is made. If it's a reference to an object, a copy of the reference is made, and now the method can refer to that object wherever it happens to be in memory. And if you call through that reference a method that modifies the object, then the object will in turn get modified. If you want to modify the variable itself, then you have these concepts of ref and out that we're going to be looking at. So if I call square with an integer like 7, what's going to happen is it will make a copy of the value 7, it will use that to perform the calculation and assign a result to the local variable x, but that local variable is just a copy of the original variable in memory, therefore it doesn't actually modify the original variable. And we did this on purpose to prove to you that it does not modify the original variable in memory. X is local to square. Now, we also have this function square_ref and this other function square_out. A ref parameter is an indication that you want to receive the argument for this parameter by reference. So what this is going to do is actually link x to the original variable in the caller, and that's going to allow me to modify the value of x. Out is another way of doing pass by reference, and it too will allow me to modify the value of x back in the caller, whatever the variable is that it's referring to. The difference between a ref parameter and an out parameter is that the argument to a ref parameter must already be initialized, whereas the assumption with an out parameter is that we're going to be overwriting the original variable's value in memory anyway, and so that variable does not need to be initialized in order to call square_out. So let's see how we call these different methods back in main. We begin in main by declaring the integer y and setting it to 5, and we also have an integer z which is not initialized. We then display the value of y and simply print out that for z it's uninitialized, and the reason we did that, if we tried to display the value of z immediately right here, we'd get a compilation error because we have not yet initialized z. Now at line 18, we're saying that we want to pass into square_ref a reference to the variable y. We want to pass y by reference. And what that does is it tells square_ref where y is in memory, and it also gives square_ref access to y's value. And we can not only use that value, but we can also modify it. And so when I call square_ref, it's going to basically make x be an alias for y. We'll modify x's value with the result of the calculation here, which will perform in this case 5 times 5 and then result in x being assigned 25. Because x is just an alias for the variable y that was passed in by reference, that's actually going to modify the variable y in memory, and then when we get to line 23 and display y's value, we'll see that it's actually 25 at that point. And in fact, if I stop there for a moment and run this program, we can see that y's original value is 5, and its value after square ref is 25. So clearly, square ref modified the value. Notice that we had to specify the ref keyword in order to pass y into the function by reference. That is a requirement of C#. Now in line 19, square out receives the parameter z, the argument z, as an output reference. And what that means is z does not need to be initialized to pass it into square out, but we can still modify z and place a new value into it. And in fact, as a result of line 24, we're going to display the value 36. So let's see how we got that value. So in square out, you can see that we took the parameter that was received, which is now an alias for the variable z back here in main. We take that and modify it to be 6. Then we multiply the variable by itself and store the result in the variable. And by doing that, we wind up modifying the variable again. So initially we set the variable to 6 inside the body of the function. Then we calculate the square of that value, which is 36, and modify the variable again. And the value was then placed into the argument z, which we then displayed here. And we know that z was not initialized originally, so when we display 36 here, that's our proof that indeed we modified the variable z in the square out function. Now, at lines 27 and 28, we demonstrate the call by value by passing just the value of y and just the value of z into our square function. Now, in each case, when we call square, it receives the argument by value, so a copy of the value is made, and even though we're modifying that copy, it has no effect on the original value back in main. So after doing these two calls, y and z are not modified, and to prove it to you, we display their values once again, and you can see here that y is still 25 and z is still 36, even though the square function attempted to modify their values. And again, that's because copies of the values were actually passed, not the locations of these variables in memory. So again, just summarizing what we looked at here, you can create functions that receive parameters by reference in C#, and you have two ways to do it, ref and out. And the key difference between them is that a ref parameter must be initialized before it's passed into the function, and an out parameter does not need to be initialized before it's passed into the function. And the other key thing is that in order to make the actual call to these functions, you must also use the ref or out keyword as appropriate based on the original function definition.